And I said, oh, and I suppose a smart barber could find it? And he said, yep. He waddles over to his yellow wall. Now, National Geographics have yellow binding, and he had, since the turn of the century, collected every issue. And he went up and down, he said, oh, here it is, and he walks out, January 1973. It's an article by the National Geographic on centurions. 4 cultures all over the world. They have the Georgians high in the mountains, they have the Azerbaijanis high in the mountains, the Huns high in the mountains, and the Titicaca Indians in Peru high in the mountains. About 10,000 miles apart. This guy's 103, looks like he's 60. He has a father who's 129 and a grandfather who's 150. Now, if we said that to the AMA, they would say, foul, foul. The oldest woman's in Pennsylvania and she's 117 and she has a birth certificate. Show me the guy's birth certificate. Well, I ask you, if you were 150, what year were you born? 1849, right? Well, if you're born in 1849, guys, you would have to wait 20 years to get your certificate because they didn't issue birth certificates until 1869. So how can we use this stupid measure that didn't exist? These guys are. Because you see, he also has, this fellow here also has a grandson who's 57 years old with a birth certificate from Chicago. So if we take the Chicago birth certificate, great-great-great-great-great-grandpa has to be at least 150. Now, how old should you live? In America today, the average person lives to be 75. A woman is 76, a man 74. They don't expect to live much longer. How long should you expect to live is the question. Well, let's go back to when this guy was born, 1849, okay? If we're in Albuquerque in 1849, and we're talking to all the people there, and we ask the question, what's life expectancy in Albuquerque in 1849? You know what it was? 42 years old. If you were made it to 50, you'd have to be the oldest man in the world. They couldn't believe it. But if we went to Albuquerque in 1899, 100 years ago, what's the answer going to be then? 49. If you made it to 60, you'd have to be the oldest man in the world. Then came the refrigerator, electricity, and that's fruits and vegetables all year round. And we gradually bumped it up. And we're now at 76. But shouldn't we expect 76? Well, I'm glad you're saying no, because, you see, the Bible says, Genesis 6:3, man shall not be immortal, but man shall live to be 120. And the Bible says something else too, because you see, Adam, in the biblical patriarch, he lived to be 930 years old. Seth, 912. Enos, 905. Methuselah was the old boy at 969 years old. They lived in the Garden of Eden, which had all the nutrients in the world. They kept eating them nutrients. Then came the floods. Well, Noah was one of them, and he lived to be 950. But after the floods, poor boys didn't have as much nutrients in the Garden of Eden, and Shem only made it to 600. Selah, 433. Eber, 464. More floods came. Less nutrients. Terah only made it to 205. Abram, 175. Isaac, 180. Jacob, poor boy, 147. He was the baby. The Bible is a history book. It's real. In 1982, when I picked up that National Geographic, I also picked up a National Geographic with a Chinaman on board. You see, apparently, the Chinese, there are places there where they live to be 102. For example, there's a province called Bama, and here's a newspaper article this last year, reaching 100 routine in Bama. Okinawa is 105, some make to 150, oops, without American birth certificates, but they make it. The bottom line is, how old should you be? Well, the simple way of resolving the issue is to say, okay, we're going to look at all living things. And we're going to find an animal factor. The animal factor, if you have a dog, he matures at 2, dies at 14. 14 over 2 is 7. If you have a horse, matures at 3, dies at 21. 21 over 3 is 7. Rabbit, 11 months, 6 years, 7. Hamster, 5.5 months, 3 years, 7. A human, 18, 127. Whoops. But you're settling on 3.5 as your factor. We're the only animal in the world that has a 3.5 factor. If we measured this in 1849, it would have been 2. And then in the turn of the century, it would have been 3. It's now 4. I guarantee you, in the year 2099, when I ask the question, it's going to be answered. 150 is what they'll all expect to live, because they will be living to 150, not with the bodies that you're looking at, because you see, the DNA full of calcium keeps replicating and you don't grow old. I got pictures in this National Geographic. A guy is 118 and he's having a sword fight. A guy 108 is riding bucking broncos. They don't grow old. They do their work. What have they got in common? The calcium factor. Couldn't wait to look. You see, except for the Japanese, every one of them is above 8,500 feet. The only source of water is melting glaciers. When the glacier melts, the ground-up rock comes with it. The water looks turbid and milky. Looks just like milk, and they call it milk of the mountains. Every quart of the milk of the mountains contains 18,000 milligrams of calcium, or 18 times the RDA of calcium. And they drink 3-4 quarts a day, and when they put this milk on their crops, the potatoes and the tomatoes, everything's loaded with calcium. And we add up, and we look at calcium, magnesium, potassium, all the goodies. And we say, how much are these people taking? How much do the people all around the world take to live to be 100 routinely, never get sick, to have no cancer, no diabetes, no heart disease, age at half the rate we do? How much are they eating? The answer is 100 times the RDA of everything. Those RDAs that Dr. Reich calls them are recommended death allowances, because they're so low they guarantee you're going to be sick. What this means is there is no such thing as a vitamin and a mineral that are toxic, because they have 100 times, and their side effect is prolonged life, prolonged health, and prolonged youth. Boy, give me them side effects. Let's have a drug in America with them side effects. And it's nonsense. Have you ever heard of anybody, any of your friends, dying from calcium? I mean, don't be stupid. Well, they got us believing anything you want us to believe just by telling us. Some of you believe that the sun causes cancer. Anybody here sun causes cancer? How do you explain that all these cultures have in common they're in the sun at least 7 to 10 hours a day, every day? Not one case of cancer. You believe the sun causes cancer? Then how come the northern tier states have twice as much breast cancer as the south? How come from the Mexican border to the Canadian border, prostate cancer goes up 287%? I'm in Africa last year. And last year in Africa, I took a good look at these black people, because they're in the sun for 10 hours a day, naked in the sun. And the thing that amazed me was the texture. There were no wrinkles, there were no nothing. And all these people, and there were millions of people, and not one case of skin cancer. Not one case of skin cancer, with millions of people in the sun. I went to Mexico in the mining industry, up in the hills, and there were millions of people naked with loincloths. Not one case of skin cancer. I come back to my beloved Phoenix, where the white albino from Detroit has skin cancer, the white albino from Washington State has, and they have 5 other diseases too. They're all white albinos. They have 5 diseases, and the sun did not cause the disease. The sun prevents all cancers. It triggered it off because their genes are weak with the cancer. But had they been in the sun all the time, what would have happened? Well, remember that vitamin D that allows you to absorb 10 times the nutrients? Every hour in the sun in your bikinis, you produce 50,000 units. You know what that is? That's over 100 times the RDA. The